I'll never forget the night Papa beat Mama until she could barely walk. Her crime, betting another girl. That was my sister, Chizoba, the sixth one. We hid in a corner, trembling, listening to the sound of his belt hitting her frail body. I couldn't understand why he was so angry about us, his own daughters, as if we were curses instead of children. That night, I knew life would be hard for all of us, but especially for Mama. We lived in a small house with a roof patched so many times I could even count every scrap of metal used to cover the holes. Papa's anger filled that house like smoke, suffocating and thick. He would come home each day, look at us and turn away with disgust. To him, we weren't enough. To him, we were a shame. But Mama, she would smile, pat our heads and say, "My daughters are my strength." Even when her face was swollen and her voice was weak, she never let us feel like we were less. School was another struggle. While other children went happily, knowing they had parents who would ask about their day, we trotted along the dirt road with worn-out slippers and hunger going at our stomachs. Papa said educating girls was a waste. Who will marry a woman who speaks big grammar? He sneered. But Mama found a way. She sold vegetables at the market, saved every penny, and quietly paid our school fees. Every time we left for school, she would pack a small piece of yam or plantain in our bags. "Learn as much as you can," she would whisper. "Your future is brighter than this place." It was her secret rebellion, a small fire she kept alive in each of us, even as Papa's world tried to snuff it out. I started noticing how Mama's back bent a little more each year. Her hands were rough from tilling the soil, and her feet cracked from walking miles to fetch firewood. But she never complained, not even once. Papa didn't give her any money to run the household. If she wanted soap, food, or anything for us, she had to find a way herself. And she did. Always. Sometimes she'll come home exhausted, barely able to stand, but her face lit up when she saw us. Papa, though, was relentless. Each time Mama earned a little more, he would demand of it. If she refused, he would remind her that she was just a woman and that we, her daughters, were useless. In his eyes, Mama's hard work was just a reminder of his shame, of the sons he would never have. I learned to hate the way he looked at us, like we were stains on his life. When my eldest sister Chinaza turned 12, Papa tried to marry her off. He said she was eating our food for nothing, but Mama stood her ground, arguing that Chinaza was still a child. They fought that night, and Papa struck her hard. We huddled together, holding each other tightly, too scared to cry. Chinaza held Mama afterwards, dabbing her wounds with a torn cloth. The next morning, Mama took Chinaza's hand, looked into her eyes and whispered, "No one can decide your life for you." She promised that she would make sure each of us had the chance to finish school. I didn't know how she managed, but she already taught us one thing: Mama never broke her promises. Mama's strength was a shield, but it wasn't invincible. Papa's words started to eat at us. Some days, we even wondered if he was right, if maybe we were useless. Why else would we live like this? Why else would Mama suffer so much? But Mama never allowed us to think that way for long. Whenever she saw doubt in our eyes, she would pull us close and tell us, "You are more than this. Remember that." In those quiet moments, I saw the fire in Mama's eyes. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting. And she wanted us to fight too. Even as we watched her struggle, we knew that if she could bear all this, we could too. Papa's anger grew colder over the years. He stopped speaking to us altogether, and when he did, it was only to insult us. He called us worthless mouths and blamed us for every hardship. Even the smallest things, a broken pot, a missed meal, were our fault somehow. We learned to avoid him, to make ourselves invisible. Mama was our shield, absorbing his blows, both the words and the fists. But Mama didn't back down. When he threw her vegetables out of anger, she would pick them up one by one without a word. When he called her names, she held her head high. She had something he couldn't take, her dignity and the love she held for us. One day, Chinaza came back home with news that could change our lives. She had met a teacher at school who was willing to help her find a scholarship for her studies, but she was afraid to tell Papa. We all were. He would accuse her of being too ambitious and say no daughter of his should dream beyond her station. But Mama encouraged her, telling her to follow her dreams, no matter what Papa said. When Papa found out, he was furious. He accused Chinaza of disrespecting him, of wanting to embarrass him in front of the community. He threatened to send her away, but Mama stood between them. She is not going anywhere, she said, her voice steady. That night, we saw the strength of a woman who had endured too much to give up now. Chinaza won the scholarship. She became the first girl in our village to go to a secondary school outside our town. When she left, it was both heartbreaking and hopeful. Papa didn't say a word, but we could tell he was furious. Yet Mama's pride in Chinaza was clear. She sent her off with a small bag of food and blessings, tears of joy streaming down her face. Go and show them what a daughter can do, she said. That day Chinaza left, a small part of us left with her, but her courage gave us hope. If she could escape, maybe one day we could too. As the years passed, each of us found small victories. My sister Ifeoma started sewing for the local women, earning small money that helped us all eat better. Amarachi became a midwife's apprentice, learning how to bring new life into the world. Mama celebrated every one of these steps, treating them like grand achievements. These are my daughters, she'll say proudly. Papa only grew colder, calling us the family of useless girls. But Mama taught us to ignore his words. We knew we were more than his insults, even if he would never see it. I remember one day, the head of the village came to our house. Word had spread about Chinaza's scholarship, about the girls of our family who were starting to stand out. He told Papa he should be proud of us. Papa scolded, muttering something about useless girls. But the chief cut him off. Your daughters are a blessing, he said firmly. Any man would be proud to call them his own. For the first time, I saw a flicker of shame in Papa's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough. We held our heads a little higher after that day. Papa's bitterness began to eat away at him. His friends stopped coming around, tired of his anger and complaints. Mama, though, remained kind to him, even when he didn't deserve it. She brought him food, offered him medicine when he was sick, and never once threw his hatred back at him. I do it for me, not for him, she told us quietly. Anger will only eat you up. In her quiet way, Mama taught us the power of forgiveness. She was stronger than him and everyone could see it. As we grew older, people in the village began coming to us for help. They would ask Ifeoma to sew their clothes, Amarachi to help with their deliveries, and even Chinaza, when she returned from school, to tutor their children. Mama's daughters were becoming respected in the community, and Papa had no choice but to see it. It was a slow victory, one built on years of patience and grit, but it was a victory that was undeniable. We were showing everyone, even Papa, that daughters could be blessings too. Papa tried to assert his authority one last time when I got a job offer in the city. I had saved enough money from teaching to move, to start a new life. He forbade it, saying a girl had no business leaving home alone. But Mama stood by me, her support stronger than his objections. Go, she said, her voice steady. Live your life and make it yours. Living was hard. I hugged Mama tightly, thanking her for everything. As I walked away, I saw her standing there, her face proud. She had given us all the strength we needed to fly. Life in the city was different, but I felt Mama with me every step of the way. I found work, made friends, and even rented my own little apartment. Every night, I thought of her resilience, and of my sisters who had fought their way to a better life. We were scattered now, each carving their own paths, but we were always bound by her love. And Papa, he remained in that small house, his bitterness his only company. It was a sad end, but it was the one he chose. Years later, I returned to the village. Chinaza had organized a small party, a celebration of our success. The whole village came, even the chief who congratulated us on our achievements. Mama was there, her face beaming with pride. Papa stayed in his room, unwilling to acknowledge the daughters he had tried so hard to ignore. That night, as we sat outside, Mama looked at each of us, her eyes glistering with tears. "You were never curses," she said softly. "You were my greatest blessings." In the end, Papa couldn't break her spirit. He couldn't take away the love she poured into us. And in time, even he began to see the truth. He grew frail, sick, and was left with only Mama to care for him. She did, as she has always done. Not out of duty, but because she was a woman of integrity, a woman of strength. We watched as she fed him, washed him, and spoke to him with kindness, even though he had never given her the same. When Papa passed away, the villagers turned up for his burial, but the real celebration was for Mama, the woman who had raised 6 strong daughters against all odds. People spoke of her resilience, her kindness, and the way she had turned bitterness into love. She was our hero, our role model. She stood by his graveside, head held high, a quiet strength radiating from her. She didn't cry, but there was peace in her eyes. The burdens she had carried for years were finally laid to rest, and her spirit, unbroken and steady, seemed lighter than ever. With Papa gone, Mama began to blossom in a new way. That house that had once echoed with his anger became filled with laughter, warmth, and peace. She started teaching young girls in the village how to plant their own vegetables. Girls should know that they can stand on their own, she said, her voice full of hope. Mama was building something bigger than herself. Her quiet acts of love, her wisdom, and her resilience were gifts she passed on to others. She showed everyone that strength wasn't just loud, it was steady, like roots growing deep into the soil. As the years went by, each of us, her daughters, found our way back to Mama, bringing our children to meet the grandmother who had shaped our lives. We shared stories of her strength, telling our children how she fought hard for us, protected us, and taught us how to value ourselves even when no one else did. Mama's spirit became part of us all. One evening, as we sat with her under the moonlight, she looked at us with a satisfied smile. "I always knew," she said softly, "that my daughters would shine brighter than I ever could." Her eyes held the pride of a woman who had not only survived but built a legacy of love. Mama passed away peacefully one quiet morning, her face serene, her hands folded over her heart. The villagers gathered again, this time to honor her, the unbreakable woman who had changed so many lives. We buried her beside Papa, knowing she had earned her rest. As we stood by her grave, I felt her presence within me, in my sisters, and in every woman who had ever doubted her worth. Mama's life had been hard, but she won in the end. She had raised daughters who were strong, capable, and loved. And in the village, they would remember her name, not for what she had endured, but for the strength, love, and unyielding courage she had shown.